Hi, I'm Mario Ariave with Utmost Performance. Let's talk about sales today. So, what we're going to do is I'm going to give you an example of what a person who's in the business of sales, in other words, they have a product or a service that they're looking to get others to purchase. I want to talk about the mindset that a good salesperson has. And here it is. A good salesperson, they go about their day and they kind of understand this particular principle. If they're really good at what they do, then they've actually put like some kind of a number or a statistic where they have a probability in their minds of making a sale. So let's just say that this particular salesperson, their hit rate, in other words, their conversion of pitches, asking somebody to buy, to sales, converting those sales maybe is something like 40%, which is pretty good. In other words, that particular salesperson, what they know is that if they approach 10 customers, 10 potential buyers, four of those are going to be successful. And so what they do is they kind of keep a little bit of a record and they go about their day. They're plugged into some kind of a process, and I'll get back to that in a second. What they do is they go and they pitch, email, phone call, door to door, whatever it happens to be. And number one, swing and miss, no sale. Okay, so now we're at the 40%. We've missed on one. So now out of the last nine or the next nine pitches that this individual will make, four of those nine will be successful. So now their percentage of making a sale has actually gone up from 40%. Okay. So now they go and they approach customer number two. This time it's an email. And that email comes back with a negative response or no response. Okay. So now we're 2 out of 10. And we know that we convert 4 out of 10, or they know that. So they've got 8 more pitches that they are going to make. And out of those 8, they can reasonably assume that 4 of them are going to be converted. In other words, they started at 40%. Now they're at 50%. And what this particular salesperson is doing is they're just calculating when do they feel that that success is going to happen. Okay. That's number one. Let's put that off to the side because there's two sides to every coin. And here's the other side of this coin. Same salesperson with the same success rate, 40%. In other words, 4 out of 10. They pick up the phone, they make their first call of the day, converted sale. The person wants to buy that product or that service. And so now they understand that one of their 4 successes out of those 10 has now been accounted for. So again, just using their numbers, they go, all right, well, now I'm going to make 9 more contacts with a customer. And out of those 9, I'm down to 3 out of those next 9. In other words, 3 out of 9 is, for those of you not very well good at mathematics, is 33%. So now they're going from that 40% to that 33%. So those are both sides of that coin. And again, a good salesperson is going to have something like this in place. Now, why do they have this in place? So let's get into why they do this and how it would apply to you to make you a better cyclist. Here's the reason. Because this particular salesperson is trying not to get too high or too low based on sales that they make or that they don't make. In other words, if they convert, like scenario number 2, the nice side of the coin that we want to think about, then they understand, okay, since I converted that first sale, I'm no longer 40% for the rest of my calls for these 9 calls. I'm now at 33%. My percentage has actually gone down. In other words, my likelihood of failure has actually gone up. Now, on the other side of the coin, this particular individual, they made 2 contacts that were unsuccessful. They were not converted. So they can now reasonably assume that 4 of the next 8, to make that 10, are going to convert. In other words, they've gone up to 50%. And so what they're trying to do is they're trying to kind of massage into their mindset. This is a mindset kind of message that I'm sending to you. They're trying to massage into their mindset that I cannot get too happy and fired up about sales that happen, because then there's going to be some that don't happen that are right around the corner. Again, we're just using statistics and numbers. And it's the same thing when you don't make those sales. You can't get too down on yourself. You can't start moping around and decide not to make more phone calls or more contacts, because there are successes coming per those statistics. And so that is what I see as a very common mindset amongst salespeople that are successful, that make a lot of sales. Now, but it's not because they allow these emotional swings. Okay. It's because they have a process. Remember what I said? They have a process. In other words, they've gone out and they've done the homework on, I've researched my personal hit rate and kind of what my data set tells me. When I make these amount of contacts, these are the sales that I can expect. And so I have a reasonable expectation of my performance. Okay. And this is based on, again, we can go deep into the weeds on this, but am I doing most of it on the phone? Am I doing most of it on email? Am I going door to door? And so they have a process, okay, I do these before this time of the day, and then I do these later, whatever it happens to be. But that particular individual gets used to having a certain rhythm, a certain pace, and a certain methodology, otherwise known as a process, that they plug into, that has gotten them to those particular statistics that they can count on and they can rely on, at least use as a backdrop. But they can't allow their emotions to get involved. And so kind of crossing the tracks over to what I have seen in my experience happens a lot for athletes, for cyclists, is, how did that workout go? The workout went, again, let's use the sales analogy. I'll go with side of coin number one, which was the individual popped those first 2 calls. They were converted as sales, or they weren't converted as sales. I'm sorry. And so, okay, 10 workouts. Let's just use the same example. 10 workouts. I've had 2 workouts where, my coach set out certain numbers and certain parameters. I didn't hit them. I came up short. Now, let's kind of take out some variables here. The effort was there. I made a good effort there. I'm not sick. I'm not injured. Those things can compromise performance. So none of that is present. It's just, for whatever reason, I got on the bike and I had a workout to do, and I went to execute that workout, and it just didn't go according to the statistics, to the stats, to the analysis that has been done by me or my coach to set zones, heart rate zones, power zones, whatever it happens to be. And those 2 workouts just swings and misses. Well, if you have a hit rate, hopefully higher than 40%, but let's just use 40%. If you have a hit rate of 40% of your workouts, you generally tend to hit them. And again, I'll kind of put a little asterisk here and I'll pause. I think that hit rate is too low. So we're talking about sales. Sales is a different beast than, cycling performance. And in my case, like coaching, you don't want to have an athlete that only has a 40% success rate in workouts. That's not what I do personally. I mean, you want that number to be higher. You don't necessarily want it to be 100. And if you stay tuned to this channel, I'll probably do a post about that. You don't want it to be 100, because I don't want you to hit it out of the park every time, but I don't want it to be 40 either. But getting back to this example here, if you missed on 2, but your hit rate is 40, then you can expect that the next time you throw your leg over your bike and you go to a workout, you're getting closer to that workout falling within the expectations that you or your coach has put out for you. On the other side of the coin, you come out, and I've probably seen this more often than not, to be honest. You go out and you have one of those days, and I love these days, and I'm glad you guys have these days. But again, we have to see them accurately for what they are. You have the day where there was no, they call them no chain days. There was no chain on the bike. The bike seemed to be pedaling itself. I mean, you thought you had a motor down there. You thought you were on an e-bike, but you weren't. You woke up from your dream. And the workout went great. Numbers were good. Maybe numbers you've never seen before. Wow, and you convert. You made the sale. Now, a lot of times what happens is that mindset switches to, every single time I get on the bike, it better be one of those. And it's not. Maybe you have 2 of those in a row. very rarely two of these happen in a row, but maybe it was a really, really good day on the bike, unbelievable, all-time type performance type day. And then maybe the next time you do that workout, like you hit it again. But now what happens is, wait a minute, let's play percentages. Remember that salesperson, since they converted 2 of their first 10, then they were down to a lower conversion rate for the remainder of their calls or their contacts. And so at some point, you're going to go take on a workout. Again, if you're being stretched enough, if your goals are lofty enough, if the parameters being set out are high enough, that you're probably going to swing and miss on a workout and maybe not hit it, especially not get back to that level where, you felt like you had no chain and you couldn't do anything wrong. And so what happens is if we get too high or we get too low, then what happens is we have these mood swings. And then we're looking around the corner at the next expectation and we're waiting for it. And if we kind of pause here for a second, this creates stress and anxiety. When we begin to actively just kind of get out of just what's around us right here and what we can control, we begin to go outside and look for expectations and things to happen that maybe will, maybe won't. There's that uncertainty there. And what does uncertainty do? It creates anxiety. It creates stress. It creates fear. Go to a movie. The best movies that you can remember probably are the suspense ones where you don't know what's going to happen next and you're really tuned in. But at the same time, there's that little bit of like, I don't know what's going to happen. And you kind of get really into it and you get, all anxious. And, we don't want that. When it comes to performance, we don't want to have that. So what we want to have is we've got this circle here that we can control. What can we control? Again, it's good to have analysis. It's good to have data. It's good to know, hey, you know what? On this particular day, if you ride in this zone, power should be about this. If I want you to ride in this zone, heart rate should be about this. That's great. But this circle right here that we can control is our process. So how are we going about the process of preparing ourselves for that session, the execution of that session, what happens after that session, and just loosely entertaining the outside of the circle things that could happen, which is great workout, maybe no chain type workout, maybe almost got it, but not quite workout where we failed, maybe a miserably failed workout. But you see, that's outside of this. So to end with our salesperson that we started this video with, when they send that email, when they make that phone call, when they knock on that door, there's a certain point at which they come out of that circle because they have to make the contact with the other person to try to sell them whatever it is, good or service. But they don't know what the person on the other side of the door is going to say to their pitch, or they don't know how the reply is going to come across to their email, or if the person that they call even picks up the phone. You see, that's outside. And a good salesperson is able to say, I made the phone call, I knocked on the door, I sent the email. Now what happens on that other side, I can rest knowing that I've done everything that I can to see what's on the other side of that. Same thing with us. When we look in Training Peaks or wherever it is you go to get your stuff and you have a workout, and then you say, okay, my circle here is doing 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, great. On the bike, start pedaling, warming up, whatever it is. And then here we go. It's interval time. And then just being excited, not stressed or anxious, but actually having a genuine, excited curiosity to see, okay, what's on the other side of this over here? Is it going to be a success? That'd be cool. Is it going to be a failure? That would be cool too. Why? Because we're trying to get out of being controlled by the numbers and the statistics that are outside of this circle that we really can't control. We think we can. Great coach can dial in zones and get heart rates all nice and tidy and all those kind of things, set forth the best plan, use all these apps now that analyze wind speed and like all these things. Analytics are amazing, but analytics get proven wrong all the time, and that's outside of the circle. So we've got powerful machines and now AI and all this other stuff that can't necessarily predict with 100% certainty because they can't predict with 100% certainty what's on the outside of that circle. Then I would argue that it's foolish for us to spend time outside of that circle. So again, what is your plan? What is your process? What does your circle look like? Think about that. Write it down. Share it with somebody. Share it with me if you want. Comment on this video and let me know, or message me or whatever. If you kind of don't know, but you're interested in having some kind of a process, having some kind of a circle right here that makes you feel good because you can control those things and then you can just kind of rest easy on what's outside of the circle, then I can help you with that. And so reach out, because at Utmost Performance, we're all about that process. Like it says, or like I say often, this is more than just science. Notice this video had nothing to do with a threshold or a VO2 max or a ventilatory rate or heart rate or HRV or any of that. This video was strictly about systems and processes and your mind, and how your mind interacts with your body and your bike to make you successful. All right, y'all. Thanks so much for tuning in. Till next time.